Welcome to Shakti Collective, and I'm Nandita, and today we have with us Dylan Fox. Dylan, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Dylan. I am a UX designer and researcher here in Oakland, California. I got my master's in Masters of Information Management and Systems from the University of California, Berkeley, where I did my master's thesis on augmented reality and visually trying to understand how we can use the HoloLens as an assistive device. And since then, I've been working as a contractor on a number of different kind of AR and accessibility focused projects.
That is so cool. That's very exciting. I remember seeing HoloLens as a student and undergrad. It was one of the coolest things that I was seeing. And now you've seen how much that's evolved. So that's so amazing.
Yeah.
So how do you describe accessibility in 3 words?
I would describe accessibility as usable by everyone. Accessibility is about ensuring that everybody can use a tool or an application regardless of their situation or ability. Not just talking about people with permanent disabilities. Accessibility means that you've given people enough flexibility to be able to use your application with whatever physical and cognitive means they have at their disposal. That means they can use it with one hand, maybe because they have a motor disability, or maybe because they're holding an ice cream cone in the other hand, right? They can use it without hearing because maybe they're deaf, or maybe they're a bartender and they can't hear themselves think over the club music. They can use it without seeing because maybe they're blind, or maybe they prefer to have things read out loud because English is their second language and it's easier to understand that way. And it goes to mental resources as well. People's brains are wildly different, and designing in ways that support multiple kinds of learning and interacting will help everybody, neurodiversity and neurotypical alike. So accessibility is all of that.
That absolutely, absolutely. And so, can you tell us a little bit about why do you care about accessibility? Is there a story, or is there something that happened, or just what what makes that a passionate field for you?
Sure. So I think I care about accessibility because I came into UX design, which is user experience design, originally via engineering. I got my mechanical engineering degree from Berkeley and kind of decided that thermodynamics wasn't as fun as it was cracked up to be. Cognitive engineering is much more interesting. Understanding how people think and learn and use tools, and how we can use that knowledge to create better tools for people. So I've always had this very kind of functional rather than aesthetic approach to design. I want to make things that help people get their jobs done. And now good UX design is about recognizing what your users need and designing around that. And for most of my career, that kind of just meant what my users were trying to do, watch a video or check the status of a machine or what have you. But I've come to realize that designing around needs also means designing around capabilities. If your users can't use your application, it's useless to them. And
Right.
considering that 1 in 4 US adults have some sort of disability, that's a lot of people, who, if you don't take those people into account, you're not going to be a great designer.
For sure, for sure. And coming back to like you started out in engineering and then you're now in this field. Over in your time, is there an aha moment, or I guess what was your first aha moment with accessibility?
Mm-hmm. I would say my first kind of aha moment was when I was at the HCII conference 2018, which is the Human Computer Interaction International, to present a paper I had written on element selection in virtual reality, which was something that hopefully be useful to a lot of engineers and CAD artists trying to work in VR. And I saw some really cool presentations on how augmented and virtual reality could help people with disabilities. One on AR for real-time subtitles and plays, one for VR interview training for people with social anxiety disorders, a couple of others. And it really kind of opened my eyes to this huge opportunity of here's this technology that we've been kind of eagerly applying to all sorts of challenges, and both we need to figure out how all these cool applications in engineering and medicine and training are going to work for folks with disabilities so that they can benefit from them too. And B, this tech can do so much good for people who need help doing things that, a lot of us able-bodied folks take for granted. We just need to kind of put that thought and design into it to make that happen.
That is amazing. Wow. Yeah, I've never been to HCII myself, but that sounds very, very exciting. And in terms of like, I'm sure you've met so many other people as you've progressed in your career. And overall, is there, I know it might be hard to pick one person, but is there someone or a couple people that come to mind that may have had an influence on your accessibility professional career? What lessons did they teach you? Anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I would say someone who's been influential in my accessibility career is probably Lucy Greco, who's the web accessibility evangelist at Berkeley. I was doing my master's thesis on augmented reality for visually impaired people, and not only did she take the time to kind of counsel our group on a ton of things for that project, she was willing to come over to Southall and help test our janky prototype. And since we were all sighted, it was really important to have blind folks in to test and give feedback. We wanted to design with blind people and not at them. And I think people in her position have had to deal with a lot of kind of cocky designers and developers who think they've solved blindness when they've really just made another kind of useless disability dongle. And the fact that she made time for us and supported us and answered all those questions really helped us get on the right track for our project, really made a big difference to me. So yeah, thanks, Lucy.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's wonderful. And can you tell us a little bit more about your work, your current work, and how your current work may be making an impact within digital accessibility?
Yeah, I'd say there's two ways right now that I've been trying to push for accessibility. The first is the project I mentioned earlier that I started in my master's degree. I'm trying to figure out how we can use augmented reality headsets like the HoloLens to help people with visual impairments both navigate around unfamiliar environments and just get important information from their environment. That's a project that's still in the research phase, but I think figuring out how we can take these headsets that are just crammed chock full of sensors and machine vision capabilities and all sorts of technology, and putting that in service of people that don't see well themselves is going to be something that's going to bear a lot of fruit in the future. So I'm happy to be pushing that research forward. And then, just a sec. Excuse me. The other thing I've been doing is working with a group called XR Access. XR Access is a community of people that are interested in supporting accessibility in XR, which you might have guessed from the name. But I've been volunteering as the application accessibility group lead there. And we've been really doing our best to understand both the state of accessibility for what's been made so far, and just bringing all sorts of people in industry and academia to the table to make sure that what's made in the future is accessible.
That sounds like valuable experience, both like in the group and outside. So that's pretty awesome. And so, are there experiences like this or some others that may have been beneficial to you as a designer as you've gained experience in accessibility?
Yeah, I think in terms of what experiences were beneficial for me, I would say that the biggest thing that I did was to when I decided to get interested in accessibility is to try to find and work with people with disabilities. When I got serious about accessibility, one of the first things I did was start volunteering with a group called Lighthouse Labs in San Francisco. They're a group that supports a lot of blind folks with technology and community service. And just meeting a lot of the people there and volunteering with them, even just as what I did for a while I was a bingo caller, but just meeting a bunch of folks, learning the diversity of opinions and the practices, and using tech that's both aimed at people with disabilities and how people with disabilities try to use mainstream technology, and often how they're treated as really second or third class citizens in the world of technology. I think meeting those people that you're going to be designing for is just really important. So you do your reading and you take some classes. DeCue University makes some really good classes, but I think going and actually making sure that you really physically met and gotten to know some of the folks with disabilities that you want to design for is really vital.
Absolutely, yeah. And as you've had these volunteering experiences and other experiences, how have you requested support for your professional development for accessibility knowledge? For those people who are starting to get interested or starting to request that support, what have you done, or what are some ways in which people can do that?
Well, I've mostly been doing independent contracting since getting my master's, so I don't really have an HR department that I can submit requests to. But joining a group like XR Access brought me closer to a really great community of accessibility professionals, and just reaching out to, I've reached out to a number of them just one-on-one, asking kind of how can I get better at accessibility, and really almost every one of them was really happy to meet with me and just give me advice and point me towards resources that I could use to get better.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And in all of these learnings and all of these experiences, was there something you ever learned that surprised you?
Yeah, I think something that really kind of took me by surprise is, again, just how often people with disabilities are treated as like second or third class citizens in tech. They're not really considered part of the minimum viable product. As you get things like Twitter taking years to include simple things like alt text for their images. That's why a lot of blind folks have to turn off automatic updates on their devices, because their screen readers are constantly breaking because updates weren't tested for screen reader compatibility before being shipped out. So, I think that points to a really important change we need to work for in tech to make sure that the voices of folks with disabilities are heard, and ideally get more folks with disabilities actually working in tech. Because I guarantee you that no org with a blind CEO is going to launch an update that breaks screen readers.
For sure. No, for sure. And, just to brag a little bit, right? But we want to be able to celebrate you. So what are some of your proudest accomplishments or an accomplishment in accessibility?
Sure. I mean, I'm still pretty new to accessibility, so I don't have too much I can brag about just yet. But I would say that I'm proud that when we tested my master's thesis project on the augmented reality for visually impaired people, the blind folks we tested with said basically, hey, if you get the tech to work out right in this, get the hardware, up to grade on kind of ergonomics and things, this could be really useful. And to me, hearing that, it says that the kind of sweat and tears that we put into that project are worth it. That we're onto something that could really make a difference to folks in the long run, and that it's something that is really potentially going to bear fruit in the future.
No, for sure, for sure. It's like, how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. So it's every
right.
step counts. So no, for sure, that's awesome. And so as a designer, how do you build support for accessibility in your organization or with other stakeholders?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there are a couple ways I like to build support for accessibility with some of the more ambivalent stakeholders. And the first is to emphasize the curb cut effect. So for folks that don't know, curb cuts are the little ramps and sidewalks that make it easier for wheelchair users to get around town. Well, the curb cut effect basically says that those curb cuts may have been put in place for wheelchair users, but they also made life easier for bicyclists and people walking baby strollers and people rolling dollies and skateboarders and this and that and the other. And it basically says that making something better for people with disabilities will almost every time make it better for all of their users. So I think that's one thing. And then the second is to remind the stakeholders that, both the business case and the legal case for accessibility. There are a lot of institutions that legally can't purchase technology that isn't accessible. And what's more, accessibility in the US, it tends to move forward one lawsuit at a time. People suing places for violating the ADA is really the number one way that things get enforced. So if you don't want to be the one featured in that lawsuit, just make it accessible from the start, because it's way easier and cheaper than retrofitting it after the fact.
Right. So just do it from day one. Do it from day one. Absolutely. And so, switching gears a little bit, I know sometimes this can be viewed differently. So I'm just curious to hear from you that for you, what is the difference between inclusive design and accessibility?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're inclusive design and accessibility they're very closely related. But I would say that inclusive design is a really broader design methodology that incorporates the techniques of accessibility. So for example, in Half-Life Alyx, which is this blockbuster VR game, they had this technique where you can pick up things from far away with a flick of the controller because you have these gravity gloves. Now that's a good example of inclusive design because it's fun and convenient for everybody, and it means that people who can't, bend over to pick something up off the ground can still use it. By comparison, something like, say, screen reader functionality is generally something that's more specific to accessibility. It's something that might be, totally invisible to most users of an application, but absolutely vital for the people that need it for that app to function. But even with that said, keeping screen reader users in mind is going to be a part of inclusive design as well.
That absolutely, yeah, that makes sense. And I hate bending down and picking up stuff. So I would totally love that myself. Yes.
Oh yeah, it's rad.
Yep, no, for sure. I need to try that out. And so in terms of, we've all had a fair share of mountains to climb and challenges to face. So, for you, from your thought process, what is the greatest challenge you think we face in making accessibility more of a common everyday practice in tech, where it isn't something special, right? Can we just make it more common for everyone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the big challenge we face in making accessibility more of an everyday practice in the tech industry is just the fact that there are so few people with disabilities working in the tech industry. Tech companies really need to hire more people with disabilities and incorporate them into the actual design and development and testing of these tech. Or else we'll kind of always just be playing catch up, where you release something, you find out it wasn't accessible, and you have to kind of reel it back in and fix it. And maybe that means investing in like making, say, your applications and interweb screen reader accessible, or adjusting your performance review metrics to take into account more neurodiverse people. But if you have people in your company, especially on the design team, flagging accessibility issues and keeping disability top of mind, you're really going to have much better results than if you're just trying to fix it after release.
Right, absolutely. Just bake it into the process.
Mm-hmm.
And so thinking about that, from the designer's perspective, like things that they could bake in from from day one, what do you wish every designer knew about accessibility?
I would say one thing that I wish more designers knew about is the importance of designing for keyboard accessibility, specifically being able to use the tab key to shift focus throughout an experience. Because that's really important for users that are blind or have motor disabilities, and it's important to consider in design because it fundamentally shifts the way you interact with an app from a 2D experience to a 1D experience, where instead of kind of viewing things all over the screen and being able to click on any of them, you're going past every item in a row, kind of one at a time. And so placing elements so that it's clear where focus will move, and validating that your app can be used that way is something that I think takes a lot of design skill, and yet it's a challenge that isn't even on a lot of people's radar.
Absolutely. And I guess that also changes, you talked about keyboard focus. I guess it also changes based on the format. So, how do you think accessibility is different for, more of the well-established formats like web versus mobile, or more of the experimental ones like XR, VR, things you've talked about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think trying to establish accessibility in a really rapidly changing format like XR is very different from accessibility in established formats. First, you don't necessarily know how to apply standard patterns in these new formats. Take captions, for example. If you're in XR, you can't just put them at the bottom of the screen and call it done. The person who's speaking might be behind the user. How do you indicate that? If the captions are floating in space, how do you make sure they don't get obscured by other objects in a way that doesn't create weird depth perception nonsense? And how do you even start to use keyboard navigation in a 3D environment, right? Like taking it from 2D to 1D is hard enough. Taking it from 3D to 1D is even more difficult. So I think that's part of it. Second, there's entirely new kinds of challenges. For example, we're still developing techniques to minimize motion sickness, and motion controls just require this whole new language of accessibility techniques. Groups like Walk-In VR have been working really hard on that. And then finally, I'd say, any new technology, I think there's just this kind of social challenge of just getting people to care about accessibility. New tech is so often defined by what it can do at first. It's all about being first to market with a particular solution, no matter how kind of rough around the edges it is. Good design, and by extension accessibility, often only comes into play once there are like a dozen apps that can do the what, and so the how becomes the distinguishing factor. So I think that's something that's hard to change, but I think something we can do at the very least is insist on accessibility as being part of that minimum viable product.
Absolutely. And the idea of, like you said, get people to care about accessibility, right? Like have them think about that from day one. How do you change people's minds and hearts about accessibility?
It's really challenging, but I think that the most important thing when it comes to changing people's hearts and minds is to remind them that accessibility isn't just for somebody else, some person in a wheelchair you don't know, you don't have to think about. Accessibility is about them and their family and friends being able to use technology. It's about their grandparents being able to order meds even when their eyesight is worsening. It's about their kid being able to do homework even when their arm is in a cast after they broke it in soccer practice. It's about them themselves being able to watch Netflix with captions after a long day because they don't want to wake their partner. So accessibility isn't for somebody else; it's for all of us.
It is for all of us, absolutely. And talking to so many amazing people in this field who've done so much amazing work, including you. How do you view this expert in accessibility? Like, what does this expert in accessibility mean to you?
I think every designer and developer and tester should at the very least be acquainted with accessibility. But I think being an expert, which is something I would encourage anybody who's interested to try to become, it means going beyond the circumstances of your application and trying to understand how to apply accessibility to a really wide variety of situations. It means constantly learning about new technologies and understanding how to make them accessible. It means listening to the disabled community and understanding the challenges they face, and finding a way to push the envelope and make new things accessible that never were before.
For sure, for sure. And there's so much amazing work going on in this space. And, I just love to hear your thoughts on what does the future of accessibility look like? 10 years or 20 years. What does that amazing future look like to you?
Yeah, I would love to see accessibility become the kind of expected standard. Excuse me. Just in the same way that mobile first and responsive design has. I think a lot of applications are becoming kind of more and more device agnostic, right? Like I can access Twitter on my phone, on my tablet, on my desktop, on my Xbox. I could tweet from my freaking fridge, like whatever, right? So we could figure out a way to do that for accessibility in a way that still preserves privacy. I really like to see that it get the same treatment, not forcing users to kind of stumble around for settings menus every time they do the same thing on a new platform. And then, of course, also specifically with regards to XR, I would love to see the next generation of XR devices come with accessibility built in. Right now, you have to get if you're blind, you have to get a sighted person to help you unbox and set up a headset. And features like captions and screen readers are just so either lacking or just wildly different in every app. It'd be great to have those kind of served by universal APIs and packages instead of having to have every single person kind of hack it together separately. I really hope that just everyone will be able to make use of these really cool new technologies that keep revolutionizing the world.
For sure. Yes. No, that sounds amazing. And to get that future, I guess, to achieve that future, I think we're all going to have to get together and do this. So what advice would you give to others who are thinking about becoming involved within digital accessibility?
Yeah, I would say to anybody who's thinking about becoming involved with digital accessibility, just do it. At the bare minimum, it's going to make you a better designer. because accessibility should really be part of every design and development curriculum, even if it's not the primary focus of your role. It definitely won't hurt to learn. I guarantee it.
Absolutely. And so, is as a parting advice, for others who may be even getting started or may not know at all what accessibility is, what is that one thing, right? Like it could be the smallest thing, like you mentioned, Twitter adding alt text finally, right? But something as simple as, hey, you can start adding alt text to your social media. But is there like this one thing that you can tell another designer or someone else that they can go do to achieve accessibility in their day-to-day work?
Yeah, I mean, there's a million good resources on this, right? Like the Microsoft Inclusive Toolkit, W3C has a bunch, so reading those is great. But I'd say if you're looking for something, excuse me, you can do in like the next 10 seconds, go on your phone right now and just try turning on a screen reader app, like VoiceOver or TalkBack, and then go and try to use your favorite apps with it. See if you can do it with your eyes closed. Just getting familiar with the accessibility already on your phone and computer, understanding how people are going to be, interpreting and experiencing those applications. I think that'll immediately help you design for accessibility.
It'll also help, like you said, help build that empathy so someone can understand this is how someone uses it. Absolutely.
Right.
Well, thank you so much, Dylan. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Nandita.